Hi, I'm Max Keiser. This is the Keiser Report. Yeah, Bitcoin is skyrocketing up the charts, heading into the five-figure tens of thousands, soon to be hundreds of thousands of dollars. A lot of stories emerging. You know, Stacy, it's amazing going back to the 2011 era when Bitcoin was $1, $2, $3. Of course, we were reporting it here on the Keiser Report. A lot of people would give me Bitcoins at these conferences. I gave a lot of people lots of Bitcoins. I distinctly remember giving Russell Brand 1,000 Bitcoins when they were, I think, maybe $2 a Bitcoin. That's now worth $16 million. I wonder if he still has them. Some of them were these Keiser coins, and I don't, you know, it's just lost track. It's like giving away candy at that time. Now, of course, they're worth something. Yeah,
we're going to, as we approach the end of the year and do our retrospectives and look forward to the new year, we're going to talk a lot about the history of Bitcoin and what's going on. We are recording this quite a few hours before the futures markets open in Chicago. So Bitcoin has become a huge, massive international story. Everybody's hearing about it. We're getting a lot of tweets and a lot of emails asking how to buy it, how to buy it. People are panic buying, and you're certainly seeing that. I saw a chart of buys versus sells, and it's all buys, no selling. There's nobody selling. So you're seeing quite basically a melt up and then a roller coaster down in, you know, so it's very volatile. We're going to see a lot of volatility in Bitcoin prices as these futures markets unfold. There's going to be multiple futures contracts, multiple banks. All these banks are getting into it. We are, again, recording this right before the futures markets open in Chicago. So what's your prediction? By the time this airs, it will have already happened. What's your prediction for how it will have impacted the price, if anything, on late Sunday, early Monday?
I think we're going to see upward trend because the business of futures trading needs, at their core, a lot of inventory of coins. So that I think, as I've been saying, get an inventory of coins on the books so that specialists and market makers can do their job in creating a price structure and price discovery, but you need to have an inventory to do that. Remember, I invented the virtual specialist technology, patent number 5950176. I have designed trading technologies and specialist technologies going back to 1997, and before that, I was trader on Wall Street, traded options. I was the third biggest options producer in the Shearson Lehman Hutton system for many years, and so now they're coming into my territory.
So tell us, what do you think
Bitcoin's
the
coming
impact?
into my house.
So what do you think the futures market is? A lot of people are from the precious metals market who have been watching our show, and what they always say is that the futures markets, the paper markets, have driven down the price of gold and silver. What do you think is going to have an impact or not on Bitcoin?
See, what's happening in gold and silver is that capital's fleeing gold and silver and going into Bitcoin. Capital is fleeing fiat money going into Bitcoin. Capital is fleeing all these other debt-ridden asset classes and into this new emerging asset class, and therefore you've got this upward buying pressure. People don't understand that at its heart, Bitcoin is a messaging app first, a store of value second, and a medium of exchange third. The Satoshi white paper is a bit misleading because it leads off by calling Bitcoin digital cash. That's kind of misleading. It's not really digital cash until first it establishes itself as a messaging app. Money and economics are the history of communication and trade in language. That's language explodes onto the scene. Trade explodes onto the scene. Messaging apps explode and exponentially onto the scene. Bitcoin is similarly. It's unique in this way. It's an emerging asset class. It's not quite a currency. It's not quite a commodity. It's not quite a technology. It's a combination of all these things happening in this beautifully Cartesian, elegant distribution of interests called the Bitcoin protocol, and it's eating the fiat world, eating the commodity world, eating the technology world, and it's going to 100,000, 200,000, 300,000 a coin because this is what you got to do. Instead of saying, what's Bitcoin in relation to gold? In other words, if it trades at $400,000 a coin, it would be roughly equivalent to the total above ground gold stock in the world. You have to look at it in terms of Bitcoin as related to global debt. It's not 7 trillion in debt, like 7 trillion in gold. There's 300 trillion in debt. I did the calculations, and that would imply a Bitcoin price of over $2 million a coin to monetize that debt and to get rid of that debt.
Okay, we're going really fast.
Why are we going too fast?
Yeah, we're
this
going
is
really
the revolution. The Earth spins, we're flying through space at hundreds of thousands of miles per second. Why do we, light, it's the speed of light. How can we discount that? How can we belittle that? If we put a man on the moon, we can put Bitcoin to 1 million.
Okay, as you said, many people call Bitcoin gold 2.0. If just as operating as a gold, proxy or gold of its own, a digital gold, as Bitcoin investor Novogratz has said, that would equal $400,000 per Bitcoin, just to equal the size of the gold market, which is over $7 trillion.
We made that point years ago, but continue.
Yes, this is what he determined the price would be, is exactly $400,000.
He watches our show, I get it.
Okay. I'm still asking you, however, what do you think the Chicago futures markets, we have CBOE on Sunday, and then right after CME, and then there are going to be NASDAQ, Cantor Fitzgerald, who you sold your technology to, your company to at Hollywood Stock Exchange. What do you think the impact will be on the price? Will it provide more liquidity? Will it bring in more money? Will it cause more volatility? Will it provide less volatility? What do you think will happen?
It'll create a bigger pipe for more money to flow into Bitcoin. Right now, the pipe is about, like this. It's a relatively minuscule market compared to the bond futures, the currency futures, stock futures. $5 trillion worth of Forex per day is the market. Bitcoin in that arena is a pipsqueak. By expanding these contracts, futures contracts, derivatives, and bringing Wall Street and Chicago into the mix, you're taking that small straw, which is an on-ramp for fiat, into Bitcoin, and you're making it massively bigger. And that on-ramp is going to suck in what I call the Bitcoin black hole. It'll suck every piece of fiat, debt-ridden, carcinogenic, bull-hooky central bank, Wall Street Bank. Jamie Dimon will be sucked through a straw. I mean, imagine Jamie Dimon being sucked through a straw. What he end up on the other end is a pulp of snot and degenerate, derivatives. Imagine Lloyd Blankfein being sucked through a garden hose. What ends up on the other? It's a string theory. I mean, it's the Bitcoin black hole. If you enter a black hole, he gets stringified.
Spaghettified.
He gets spaghettified. Imagine Jamie Dimon and Lloyd Blankfein being spaghettified. They're sucked into the Bitcoin black hole, and they just turn into, atomized pieces of deceit in the Hamptons looking for Matt Lauer and some underage chick.
You mentioned the size of the Forex market, and that's foreign currency exchange, the foreign exchange markets. So that's the biggest market in the world, probably by trade volume per day, 5 trillion a day, dollars versus euro versus yen versus, British pound. I forgot the name of that little country there.
That appendage on the end of Europe, that stub, run by Theresa May.
So that's $5 trillion a day. The very, very first big day, as everybody was preparing for these the futures markets to open on Bitcoin, we saw 28.7 billion in Bitcoin volume. That was up from like 5.5 billion over the summer. So now we're at 28.7 billion, but just a tiny, tiny, tiny blip compared to the whole Forex market of $5 trillion a day.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. But so is it the overwhelming? See, this is what people don't understand, is that at its heart, Bitcoin is a messaging app first, store of value second, and a medium of exchange third. As a messaging app, this is the history of economics, the history of money, the history of trade, the history of evolution. The DNA in our cells of our bodies suggests that Bitcoin will be a lot higher, because we as a species want to connect, and it's monetization of our unconscious. It's the monetization of our collective unconscious. It's what I call the psychic equity conversion, the PEC. We're converting our consciousness and unconsciousness into a monetary medium of exchange through the magic, if you will, as Steve Jobs would call it, of a messaging app, the Metcalfe's law of exponential growth, and essentially Thayer's law, if you want to talk about economics, for all you economic quants and dweebs and hacks out there, look up Thayer's law, Thiers law, of good money pushing out bad, okay? The fiat money is going the way of the dodo.
This brings me towards the end of our show, the last 2 or 3 minutes here before we go into the second half. We had finished your second part of your interview with Randy Voller. I do want to say Max will probably be on RT, talking live as these Bitcoin futures start trading.
Really?
Yeah, well, or other news.
Exciting.
Well, hopefully or probably. You're going to basically see a lot of live news about the futures markets because it's going to be a big impact and it's a big news and it's a big story. But before that, I want to turn to an interesting story that also happened on the very day that the market started going wild and Bitcoin futures up, Bitcoin prices up 5,000, down 3,000, up 6,000, down 2,000. When it was very volatile, it was emerged that Saudi Crown Prince is buyer of Da Vinci painting that sold for a record-breaking $450 million, says Wall Street Journal. They got this information from the U.S. intelligence community that it was the Saudi Crown Prince, the same guy incarcerating those hundreds of princes. And
You had to pay for the painting somehow.
Exactly. But, this is very old school, old world. Everybody's like, wow, that's the Crown Prince. This is $450 million for a Da Vinci painting. Just to put that into context, that is 3 Bitcoin pizzas at the current prices. That's 3 Bitcoin pizzas. Remember, 10,000 Bitcoin were spent for 2 pizzas at the very first ever Bitcoin meetup right here in New York back in 2011. Only 2 or 3 weeks later, there was that Prague Bitcoin conference where you and I attended. But that was just a mere 3 Bitcoin pizzas for this Da Vinci painting.
Yeah, well, absolutely. And, the entire market cap of cryptocurrencies is about $450 billion now, approaching the $500 billion mark. Cryptocurrency market will, of course, top the $1 trillion level and hit the multi-trillion-dollar level, again, because it's this amazing quantum effect of pulling in all the fiat money into the crypto and Bitcoin black hole of store of value.
You used to be the only person calling for, I remember there's some headlines back from 2012 or whatever, Max Keiser says Bitcoin market will go to 100 billion. How wacky, how crazy. But now I tune into the news or I read the headlines and it's nonstop, all sorts of names. This guy says it's going 400,000, 4 billion, 4 trillion. Everybody's like calling this.
Well,
outdo you.
Alan Greenspan was talking about Bitcoin in terms of the Continental, which is I gotta go. All right, well, stay tuned for the second half. A lot more coming your way. Even George Galloway. I gave George Galloway free Bitcoins like in 2011. He's a millionaire, multi-millionaire, George. Do you know that? Stay tuned. Hi, I'm Max Keiser. This is still the Keiser Report. I felt bad cutting Randy Voller off last time he was on, right when we were talking about free speech. So it's my frickin' show, so I make all the executive decisions, so we're having him back on, right?
Hey, great to be back.
All right.
First Amendment.
Yeah, let's get into it. Randy Voller, if you were still officially advising the Democratic Party, how can they retake North Carolina in 2020?
Well, first of all, we got to put good candidates on the ballot, and you've got to run someone in every race. One of the past problems has been a failure to run candidates in all 120 legislative races, Max.
Where do you find these good candidates? Like, the Democrats seem to be obsessed with chasing the Russian hoax ghost. Like, they don't realize that dog don't hunt, to use a Southern expression.
Well, that really has no bearing on what's going on in local, regional, and state races. What they need to do is focus on candidates that connect with their district. But you and I have talked a lot about gerrymandering.
Yeah, tell the people about that.
Well, gerrymandering is the ability for a General Assembly, a legislature, to draw the lines after a census for the districts. And so what's happened, and there have been numerous court cases in North Carolina, is the lines have been drawn where the politicians are essentially selecting the voter and not the other way around. People will say to me, well, Randy, you're partisan, you're arguing now that you're out of power, we're in power, the Republicans, give us our time. And I say, look, if your values and your ideas and what you believe actually, are worth something, then just make all the districts equivalent and let the chips fall as they may, meaning that they're, 50-50 races. If our ideas aren't any good, the voters won't vote for us. But right now you have legislative and congressional districts that are way out of balance. For instance, if you have a D next to your name in some districts, you're going to win, no matter who you are, and same with an R. And frankly, that's just un-American. It's not fair. It's not right.
You said something there that is really good. Well said. You said that instead of people choosing their politicians, the politicians are choosing their voters.
Yes.
In other words, through gerrymandering. They get together in a room and they say, if we divide up the voting blocks in this way, we know, based on demographics and psychographics, that we'll get X number of votes. And it's vote rigging. So again, this Russiagate hoax is all about fake vote influenced by a foreign entity, and yet gerrymandering is a clear-cut example of vote rigging right here. It's happening all over America. It's especially egregious here in North Carolina. Why don't they address that if they're so concerned about vote rigging?
Because people, when they get into the power, they want to preserve their grip on power. Right now, North Carolina is a purple state. It's roughly a 50-50 state. We've got 13 members of Congress. It's 10 Republicans and 3 Democrats. It should really be 7 Republicans and 6 Democrats, or 7 Democrats and 6 Republicans. Right there, you can see how egregious it is. Go to other states like Pennsylvania, and you'll see the same effect. These districts have been drawn in a way where the politicians are picking the voters. With technology as it is now, you can literally draw a line right through a bedroom, and if the husband votes Republican and the wife Democrat, that's what you get.
Now,
it's not fair.
You've said in the past that North Carolina is really a petri dish of the American political landscape as a whole. And you have, for example, the wealth and income divide, I believe, is very sharply expressed to the largest degree of any city in America in Charlotte, right?
If you look at the indices that talk about social mobility, we've got a couple areas in this state that are at the top of a very bad chart. You mentioned Mecklenburg, Charlotte, also I think Greensboro, the Greensboro, Winston-Salem area are both areas where social mobility is particularly tricky.
Now, it doesn't take a genius to figure out that industry was wiped out in this state. First, you had the Civil War that decimated much of what was happening here.
Decimated wealth. Most of the wealth was actually in property, and what was the private property? Slaves.
Right.
It went off the books.
And then you had the rise of some corporate industry with tobacco, agriculture, sweet potatoes. #1 sweet potato producer in America is North Carolina. Agriculture, I think, is $83 billion a year in exports. Don't quote me on that, but I think I saw that number while I was watching the local news over Thanksgiving. And some of the other dynamics that are part of North Carolina, as you see it, from your perch as a political man?
Well, we lost textiles, we lost furniture making, we lost a lot of industries that were outsourced overseas, whether they went to Mexico or whether they went to Southeast Asia. And that really gutted parts of this state that were dependent on those good manufacturing jobs. And of course, when big tobacco went down, we lost that too. I mean, we're in Durham. Durham was built by big tobacco. Duke University was built by big tobacco. People don't want to actually square that circle, but that's the truth.
Randy, the millennial Democrats have a radically different ethos to the baby boomer Democrats.
They do.
Far more left-wing and far less suburban and more smart city, foodie-loving, hipster localism. As a mayor, former mayor, how do you attract this new generation?
Well, generally, millennials are interested in a sense of place. They're interested in locality. So, farm to fork type of things, or some people say, tied to table, locally sourced fish instead of getting it from a salmon farm. And it's about quality of life. It's about creating experiences as opposed to living in McMansions. I think we're going to have a real tricky thing in our country as the baby boomers are downsizing and trying to offload some of these McMansions that were built in the 80s and 90s that were not very energy efficient. Who are the buyers going to be?
It's going to be one thing
interesting.
They got here that I love are trout.
Right.
With pecans. That's good. It's really good. Let me ask you another question. So the corporate Democratic Party is claiming victory with the recent Virginia elections, but many of the winners were Bernie style.
Right.
Are the millennials well and truly going to end the reign of the neoliberal Democrats like Hillary?
Well, I think the reign of centrism and neoliberalism is already on its way out. I mean, sometimes the patient doesn't know it's dead yet.
Really? You think that Hillary is dead?
Well, haven't you seen a body in rigor mortis can still kick?
So it seems as though we are in a post-Clinton era.
I think we're moving, especially with the issues with sexual harassment and the scandals, we're moving into a post-era for an awful lot of that generation, not only in the Republican Party, but the Democratic Party as well. I'm saying 2018 is going to be the year of the woman. There are going to be a lot of incredible women on the ballot, and I think that women are going to play a role at the polls and reshape this country, state by state.
We've seen evidence of this already.
We have.
There is a huge, you could almost call it a tsunami of women participating in politics as a result, in part, due to this wave of sexual scandals. Women are saying, I've had it, enough. This is our opportunity. Everyone's speaking up finally. We have unity. The problem with the women's rights movement in the past is that you didn't have enough unity. There was always some shiksa ready to sell out her sister to become a supermodel. But now there's so much sexual perversion out there, particularly in Hollywood, that there's a unity with not since the suffrage movement, rights for women to vote. Have we seen such unity? No more rape, no more Harvey Weinsteins. And this is going to create a wave of political activism and females in politics, Randy.
Well, I mean, you're seeing it by the election of Donald Trump. I mean, had Hillary won, I don't think you would have seen such a virulent backlash. But I mean, his victory with his baggage connected to the other issues that you bring up. I mean, Weinstein obviously was a big player in the Democratic Party as far as a donor, and all these others across these industries are being exposed. And women are saying it's our time. We're tired of hitting the glass ceiling. We're tired of pay inequality. We're tired of being a single mom trying to make it on 2 and 3 jobs and having a master's degree and not being paid. I see it showing up at the ballot box, and I applaud that.
Yeah, I mean, the men have had the ball for a long time. It's time to give it to the women.
It's time to see, what women can do from a local to state to federal level.
Anatomically correct, the men have had for quite some time. It's time to give those to the women.
It's time to let the women get their share of the power, because we certainly have made a fine mess of things.
Absolutely, and it can't be worse than it already is.
No, it can't.
We're entering an age in the economy that demands less actual physical strength because everything is digital. So it's more about thinking of the cloud thinking. Women are good in the cloud. They don't have the whole sense of linear thinking. Like, women can't really think linearly. They'll show up at the, you never notice this, at a toll booth, and they don't actually look for the change to pay the toll until they arrive at the toll booth. I mean, for a man, that's very frustrating. But for a woman, that's the way they think. But I think now is the time to let that kind of thinking take over.
When I first got into politics, I was the youngest on my board at age 36, and everyone, I think, at the time was between ages 50 and 80. But there was only one woman. It was an African-American woman, and I helped elect her, the first African-American woman ever in the history of Pittsburgh. And that town is almost 240 years old. As I moved on in my career and got more women elected to the board, you could see a difference in policy. So having an equality of people on these decision-making boards across the country is important. You can't have it all one gender or one class. It's important to have people from different areas to provide insight in your community. And I see that happening in 2018, 2019, and 2020. And you already saw it in Virginia in 2017.
More women on top. That's what I say.
More women.
All right, we gotta go. Randy, that's gonna do it for this edition. For the Keiser Report with me, Max Keiser, and Stacey Herbert, I'd like to thank our guest, Randy Voller. If you want to catch us on Twitter, it's Keiser Report. Until next time, bye, y'all.